As we mentioned, Esteban Gamboa, I work at Stackline. For those of you guys that don't know, we're a full funnel connected commerce analytics company. We also have a bunch of media automation tools as well. So they for some reason picked me to come moderate this. But the reason we're here to talk to you is talking to Jordan. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself and kind of what you do and how you got here.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. My name is Jordan Witmer. I work for Johnson & Johnson Consumer Health. And yeah, how I got here?
Yeah.
A whole other question. We'll stay on.
What do you do? What do you do at J&J Consumer Health?
Yeah. So I'm on our connected commerce team responsible for retail media performance. What that means is different by the day. We cover everything from our kind of angle of approach into JBPs with different retailers all the way down to the individual optimization decisions we make on the keyword level every day.
Got it. And I know you and I chatted beforehand, like you have a very fascinating background. Can you give us a little background into how you got into media and kind of your path to get there? Because it's very unique from where a lot of people come from, especially in the space.
Unique is maybe the term I would use other than fascinating. Maybe just some. So my background, actually, I don't come from advertising. I didn't start in media. I didn't start in brand marketing. I came from the supply chain side. So I started my career in forecasting. I worked for Joseph A. Bank for a while, managing supply forecasting for plants that made dress shirts in China. I got downsized out of that job and ended up at Stanley Black & Decker's doing something similar. I ended up in e-com by mistake. I was really excited. I was going to go get a marketing job. This was about 2014, 2015, and interviewed to be the channel marketing lead for power tools on Sears. I was very disappointed I didn't get that job. My consolation prize was I got to go work on e-com. So I got to go work on the DeWalt brand, if you're familiar with black and yellow power tools, for about 3 years. Got to lead that business in what we called channel marketing, so price, promo, how the different retailers play in the sandbox, so a lot of price matching conversations, and really got to learn how to operate an e-commerce business. Then we were blessed. We found out we were having twins, so we were really expanding our family. And I'm from Central Pennsylvania, so I started making phone calls. The first one to pick up and say yes was the Hershey Company. So I got to go lead the e-commerce business for Hershey on the Target account for a year, then for the Walmart account for a year. While I was there, I just happened to be there when Roundel happened. I happened to be there when WMG happened. And we started adding to that job. It was a real GM type role. We started adding content specialists. We started adding sales specialists to the team. And what was left was this media thing that I had never really gotten into before. But that was the lever I had left to really get deep into to understand how to drive the business. Got really deep into it and ended up pitching the Hershey team on creating a retail media function on their media team. Fortunately, they said yes. And the rest of my retail media career kind of took off. So I helped Hershey stand up the retail media operation over the course of about 3 years. And then actually at one of Brand Innovators events, I met somebody at J&J. We had a casual argument about the role of retail media. Shortly after, I heard from a recruiter and made the jump to J&J to help them stand up their capabilities, how they thought about the process, work with the agency. I have some of our agency partners that I've been working with for a long time in the crowd. So I've been at J&J now for just under 2 years. I've had 3 job titles in those 2 years as we try to figure out structurally how this thing goes. But for the most part, if it touches retail media at J&J, it comes across our group.
Nice. So from clothing to tools to chocolate to healthcare, quite a diverse background. I'm assuming since you started in the forecasting and supply chain and all the data analytics, it lent itself well to now retail media. You also probably did really well in guessing the final 4 of the bracket for the NCAA tournament based on all the data and forecasting and analytics. And I don't think any of us did, so that's nothing to do with your background. So obviously within retail media, over the last 5 years, we've gone from $1 billion to $30 billion, mostly driven by search. This year in 2023, retail media is predicted to be over $45 billion just in the U.S. alone. How did we get here? Like, walk me through, from your perspective, having been at all these different companies, having touched e-com in some sort of way through some of these different companies. What did you see before, kind of in the last 5 years of retail media, and where's it kind of landing today?
Yeah, it's. I think you touched on the majority of what we've seen today has been in search, and I think that was the easy first domino to fall for retailers, is to reach into, I can monetize my site. I've got a lot of traffic here. It's higher margin than selling product. Sounds great. Let's do it. And for the most part, what's been really interesting is who they're selling it to and how much inventory they have to sell. So early days, a lot of focus on search, especially when you think about Amazon, a lot of focus on search, and the ad reps are mostly calling on salespeople. And most of these salespeople haven't bought media historically. They couldn't tell you if this works, doesn't work. They don't really know how to evaluate a media plan. So what happened very early days, we're talking late teens, early days of this spike, a lot of that growth came from, well, I put the dollars in and my e-com business went up. Great, let's do more. And it was kind of that simple for a while. Now I think we're in a transition period where you're seeing a couple of things happen. One, that inventory is drying up. We're getting to the point where if you monetize a little bit more of your site, your consumer experience drops off. And if you're Walmart and you dropped a 0.5% conversion rate on selling $500 TVs, that's going to offset any money you made from advertising. And we're starting to hit a saturation point on how much inventory these retailers have to sell. At the same time, brands are starting to figure out that over time, like, one, they haven't been evaluating all these buys very deeply. Two, the price has gone up. So we're in this interesting transition period now where I think you're starting to see the focus move away from search. Search sells itself at this point. Whether you do it really well with partners like Stackline is another question, but search will sell itself, and now you're starting to see the industry shift a little bit. And what we tend to see is retailers saying, all right, everybody's going to buy my search, I get it. For me to continue to grow, I've got to go do other stuff.
And speaking of that other stuff, there seems like there's such a expansion of options as a brand and as a manufacturer and what to invest in. What are some of the criteria? There's so many retailers. You guys are so widely distributed. All the brands you've worked at, whether it's Hershey or Stanley Black & Decker or now J&J, all these brands are very widely distributed. So you have so many retailers. Within the retailers, you've got offsite, you've got programmatic, you've got connected TV, depending on the sites. How do you guys choose, or what's the criteria you use to kind of sift through and filter, like what makes a good investment in this space? Yeah,
it's a good question, and I'll give you my perspective personally. It's not necessarily the take of Johnson & Johnson Consumer Health. I tend to draw a pretty firm line between on-site search and all other media that you get from retail networks. If we're talking about on-site search, to me, it's not about whether you want to buy from Kroger, or you want to buy from Target, or you want to buy from Walmart. It's what are your distribution goals as a company? How much of the shelf should you own? Then it becomes a math problem. What does it cost to own that space? You can kind of do the math from there. For almost everything else, it's just media. It's not materially different from what brands and large media operations have been buying for years and years and years. We're talking about reach, frequency, and effectiveness of creative and effectiveness of audience. That's all we're doing. So I try to push groups to, if you're buying search, you're buying distribution. Everything else, media is media. We might call it retail media, but the dollars are large enough now. It has enough impact that the smarter advertisers are starting to treat that more like their quote unquote, I guess, is digital advertising traditional advertising now? So, more towards their traditional advertising.
Got it. And in terms of obviously, can you talk me through some of the challenges as you work through the retail media channels, especially as it relates to measurement, right? There's so much unknown in this space. How do you make those decisions across that with having gaps in kind of what you can report on or what you can understand as a team? Like maybe not necessarily what you guys are doing for how you tackle that, but like how are you looking to, is it more looking outside to solution providers, really leaning on the retailers to share more? Like where do you think it's going to kind of propagate out of in this industry so that the brands can make better decisions in their media buying investment?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really interesting as you think about kind of that, what I was talking about, that push of media is just media. And what do the measurement suites of Google and Meta look like compared to Walmart and Target and Amazon? Retail media is an industry built on the concept of ROAS. A lot of us have discovered over time that, one, we can trick ROAS really easily. I remember at some of our times at Hershey, we were asked, what should my ROAS be for this campaign? What can you promise me? And for example, a Halloween campaign, I tell them,
Great ROAS.
I can give you whatever you want. I just need to touch everybody that bought candy at Walmart last year one time as cheaply as humanly possible. I think it's old enough now, right? We can talk about this. I think we took off a segment to prove that to be true. And I want to say we got that thing up into the upper 100s just to prove a point. So you're starting to see some sharper brands start to move off of ROAS when it comes to all other media products and start to push more into transparency over viewability. How do I get all my attention tags on? How do I make sure that everything actually happened the way I thought? And I think some of that pressure applied is what has led to partnerships with groups like the Trade Desk or other kind of open source partnerships that allow you to mix and commingle your national advertising with your retail so you can treat them the same way. Because this kind of historical practice in retail it was a double-edged sword of ROAS. Of you can game it, you can make it high, but it also means that if it's not great, right? Nobody asked Facebook what their ROAS was. Nobody ever asked that question. We just asked what was the CPM. Nailed it. We've seen that kind of push in measurement away from believing the ROAS number and more into, if we're talking about search, what does my shelf look like? If we're talking about everything else, how does it perform alongside of Google or Meta?
As you build a team, I'd imagine the skill sets you're looking for has probably evolved over the last several years, especially as it relates to retail media. If you're a brand sitting in the audience and you're looking to build a team around servicing this, what are some of the skill sets, not necessarily backgrounds, but like skill sets you think someone needs to have or be successful in a role like these?
Yeah, I love this question. And usually the way that I answer it is when I'm looking to fill out my team personally, I'm looking for folks that are bilingual. So people that can speak both media and advertising and sales and understand the P&L and how
I thought you meant Spanish and English. I was going to raise my hand.
No. You're trilingual. I think that's primarily what we're looking for is folks that have cross-trained across both things. Now, those people are quite rare. It usually is somebody that either didn't do that on purpose, myself, or somebody that's been really, really intentional of trying to get to both sides. What that allows us to do is put somebody in the room or in a leadership position that can speak to career salespeople on how their investment in Walmart is going to drive X for the total business, where it sits on the P&L, how it fits, why it's trade or not trade, and have those conversations. Can turn the next day and talk to our agency about why we're structuring audiences a specific way, why we're using very specific data points in optimization, and how the two ideas tie together. That's one of the bigger things that I look for as we try to build out, I'll call it retail media specific positions. I think there's another evolution that's happening in what we would traditionally think about as shopper marketing. 10 years ago, probably, more than half of a shopper marketer's job was in store. It was a lot of physical work. It was, is the pricing right? What does the creative look like on the off-shelf display that I've got in Kroger? Do I have shelf tags or not? A lot of that work was that was the focus, and that's what you need. So you needed people who have worked in accounts, who've worked in the field, that understand that process. We had a very quick transition to now a shopper marketing job on a major account is probably 90% media buying. And you needed a wholly different skill set to have those conversations. One, to make sure that you're being a good steward of your investment. Two, to push the industry forward. I think that's been the one thing that broadly, I think our groups across probably all brands in CPG at least have kind of lacked so far, is the people that we put in leadership positions to push retail networks on change and teach them why they need certain data points and why they need to behave certain ways and be so transparent with us. The people we've put in those rooms are mostly sales VPs that really haven't done that job. They have to be re-educated on how to have that conversation and kind of push that nerve. So now I think you're starting to see shopper marketing look more like what brand marketers look like. And they start to look like people who ran businesses, ran full P&Ls, managed advertising before, know how to use broader measurement tools, run tests, and do other things. That was a really, I think, quick transition probably over the last 5 years or so.
Got it. So your job descriptions read like a bilingual retail CrossFitter, if I understand it correctly. Makes sense. If you had predictions for where retail media is going to go in the future, I know you don't have a crystal ball. What would you think are some bets you'd put on or some assumptions you'd make into, it seems like brands are, and I've been on the brand side, it feels like you're always reacting to the industry changes. If you could try and get ahead of what you think the retail media landscape is going to bring us, what are some predictions you'd probably make for the near term?
Yeah, the near term, I think I've touched on this idea before, that I think you're going to start to see a quick transition into more traditional thought on media. So I think you're going to continue to see a lean away from what historically has been retail media search-based and more into, through a Target, through a Walmart, Kroger, Amazon, you can reach every individual in the country. There's no limitation on that. So you're going to start to see the growth in retail media be from those vehicles. And you're also going to see the leadership in retail media change accordingly. You're going to see people, probably like myself, start to move out and try to make room for folks that really, really understand how to run large-scale media businesses. I'm not advocating for my own self to be removed from a role, but realistically,
you did find a job last time at Brand Innovators, so maybe you'll find another one.
We're actively not searching for jobs right now. I think that's one, that you're going to start to see that shift in both the market and in the personnel that you have managing that at different brands. Another interesting one that I don't know if anybody in the room deals with retail media across the board, the proliferation of retail media networks has been really, really straining on brands and agencies. In my opinion, it's unsustainable because what ends up happening is one of two things. We either must staff up to have individuals ready to work on, whether it's Walmart at full force, all the way down to H-E-B, Piggly Wiggly, so on. And that's not a model that's sustainable in CPG or for most advertisers. You can't support that kind of SG&A. What we've seen in other kind of parts of the advertising industry is a proliferation and a collapse. So I'm not predicting that retailers are going to merge. I think the ad inventory should. And it seems to be the most logical next step is for a collapsing or an aggregation of ad inventory across anybody that's probably smaller than the scale of maybe a Kroger. And anybody smaller than that to get the attention and the access to brand advertising spend that they need to survive, they're going to have to make it easier to buy it. I don't know how exactly that happens. I don't know who, but it seems like something we've seen happen in history a couple of times. The TV, we may see the same thing with streaming. I think retail could go the same way.
I know we have about 5 minutes left, so I don't know, Lauren, if you want to, should we open up for Q&A?
Yes. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, any retailers in the room?
Good, now
No,
we can
no.
talk some smack.
Excellent. Jordan, thanks, man. I just came from Quotient, so I've worked 4 years in the retail media space. Your last comment's incredibly important, right? So the tier 2 companies, like you said, anybody smaller than Kroger, how you guys staff for that or how they get fair and equitable media is almost impossible to handle. I know there are companies thinking about like the ad network play, which is kind of what you were teasing just before, which I think is interesting. The reason I asked about if there were any retailers in the rooms is J&J was a big client of ours for a while, good partners, always on the shopper marketing side. And part of that was the hand leading the fist, meaning when retailers would request, ever so softly but very visibly, like how much money J&J should spend per retailer. As someone who's responsible for that budget, but also managing, like you said, performance, I do, like you, see the trend switching this year, and if not, definitely next year, that finally it's going to be, no, I'm not going to spend more just because you're asking me to spend more. I'm going to spend more because it makes sense for my business. If you're open to it, I'd just love to get your perspective on how you balance that, because the merchants obviously still control in store a ton of respect. Maybe respect isn't the right word, a ton of force, we'll say.
You have to respect the force, for sure. And again, I'm going to give you my perspective, not solely from J&J, but from my career over a couple of different brands and some folks that I know. There's a couple of, I think, interesting nuggets in that group. There's how do you deal with your last question I'll do first is how do you deal with the merchant pressure? What I've seen work really well is when you can get a partner in your sales team, the person that owns that relationship with your merchant, with your buyer, to either bring you along or learn how to speak your language so you can start teaching your merchant what does it actually mean when I'll make up a scenario, right? What does it actually mean if you tell me you need another $1 million at Walmart? What happens? Well, one, it's $1 million that I don't get to spend on advertising that works better. Sorry, Walmart. Works better. It's also, hey, there's the risk that if we oversaturate this, your performance declines, and I have a tougher time justifying your original investment. And that starts to dry up the well pretty quickly. So getting in and trying to teach the people that are around, now how open they are is going to be dependent on each individual retailer. That's been one way to it. Another is we talk about the term sufficiency a lot, especially when it comes to when we talk about search. That tends to lead you a fairly black and white answer on what level of investment that you can sustain, that you feel like can perform. Getting really intentional internally about what does that mean for you? How do you do the math to get to that number? I think can help put you on a little bit stronger footing.
Any other questions?
Other questions?
I was hoping for something from a plant, either yours or mine. I didn't know.
Hey, I actually have a quick question on the targeting standpoint for this as well, where it sounds like there's proliferation across a lot of these retail media networks. Is there a strategy goal that happens at the top end that gets filtered down toward all of them? Or do you view this as independent based on each retail media network, also dependent on some of the implications that are retail specific? So if one is losing households, if one is losing trips, do you also take that into consideration from a standpoint there? Or as you talk about from a taxing standpoint, do you think about this from total J&J strategy, have that really accessed across every single retailer?
Yeah, I get to give the dreaded "it depends"
Sure.
answer
Yep.
for this one. It depends. I think the space that we talked about moving towards is as budgets get really large, these commitments get huge, you're going to start to see less and less, this is the goal at Kroger. this is the goal at Target. And more, I'm running a retail audience-based CTV buy to target reach and awareness goals for my brand. And in that it happens to be with retailer XYZ because they have this reach and this audience targeting capability, just the right thing to do for the brand. You do have to reserve a certain amount. This is what we talk about sufficiency. Like that concept is usually best applied at the individual retail level. When you made some really great points, examples of, well, got it, but I've got to fill in X to make sure I don't get delisted at Walmart next quarter. Those are things you're just going to have to accept and almost budget separately for and kind of take that out. But I do think you do both things. You mentioned targeting up front too, and how you think through targeting at this level. Some of the best success that I've had, whether Hershey, J&J, Stanley, has been when we take really intentional approaches to audience, and especially making sure that we have the tendency to get in a room, get on a whiteboard, and we'll write down 10 different audiences that could make a lot of sense for our brands. And we'll say, well, we'll run them all. Everybody gets $5,000. You get halfway into the campaign, you don't know what happened because you haven't run enough against any one of those to know if anything worked. You can't make any optimizations against it. And then you get to the end and you find out, I know we've found this a couple of times in our past, is you reached 1% of that available audience. So being a little bit more intentional in the upfront of, all right, if we mark this thing down, how many individuals is that against our budget? Can I actually hit enough people to make a meaningful difference? It's one of those things that it sounds probably super obvious to folks that have worked in marketing or in media for a long time. It's not a question that's readily available to people like me who didn't come from that world and didn't get taught that in early career. That was one of the things I had to learn pretty early. Those types of concepts of media planning really do end up applying across this world pretty well.
Awesome. I think we're at time, but thank you. That was so great. Jordan, Esteban, thank you so much. Happy birthday again. We'll be, buying you drinks later.